Okay. Thank you.
Everybody, I don't know if you guys got the same email I just got, but Aaron, actually log into something else to watch the meeting.
Is it from, who's it from, Charles?
I just got an email from Ronan. Basically, WebEx would be so that we all see each other, but that we'd have to actually put up another window to watch the live stream of the mayor's meeting.
This is,
Technology at its finest.
I don't really need to see you guys, no offense.
Well, I need to see you all. I miss you.
Miss you too, bud.
Yeah.
Miss you too, bud.
For me to work on specifically because the person who the project is named after Frederick Douglass.
Okay,
Frederick
so
Douglass
when-
spent his entire life unifying
You
people
know that, so right now,
and
in my
connecting communities.
iPad
So
and
we want to build
computer,
off
I
that
have.
foundation.
And we can hear everything on your iPad as well.
Connect the communities
Okay, but I'm gonna mute
and help
myself.
people.
Okay.
They just got it. They won't put it in until the presentation is done.
See, unlike the council, we can keep secrets. Hey, speaking of secrets, speaking of secrets, who was the councilman of Park? Chase Council. City Council? Have you asked every councilman? Have you asked all other 12 members? We'll ask. We'll ask them in press conference. I won't get into it. Like this is this current fiscal year session.
Hi everyone, this is Jackie Matthews. Walking through the council chambers. You have all the information on your webcam, so
I'm okay. Mr. Chairman, how are you? I liked your picture with the light.
The flashlight?
Yeah. I thought that was clever.
I wanted to send out a tweet today to say that boiling water works too.
Well, I have been drinking a lot of hot water. They do. They say it's something to that.
Unless they text you, unless you tell them they're texting.
Are they up? I don't see their pic. Do they only come up if they're speaking?
So some of them, their connection, like we've seen some of them come up and go down. Like Brandon was just up there, so they might be getting ready.
Are we ready with the online technology? Yes, they can hear you. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Muriel Bowser. I am the mayor of Washington, D.C. Today, I am joined by Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, who's representing the D.C. Council. I'm joined by City Administrator Rashad Young, who is the City Administrator for Washington, D.C., and our Chief Financial Officer, Jeff DeWitt. We are also joined by members of the council who are calling in and participating remotely. I am going to provide some general updates on COVID-19 and then answer some questions submitted by council members. And finally, we will get an update from on the district's financial forecast, this revenue forecast in particular, from Chief Financial Officer DeWitt. Before I go over some data, I also want to share that workers are now able to apply for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance program through DOES.gov. And this program provides financial relief to people who otherwise would not be eligible for traditional unemployment. Those workers include gig workers, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. As you know, each day we report the district's experience with COVID-19. Today we reported 167 new cases, bringing our total to over 3,500 cases in Washington, D.C., and sadly 153 Washingtonians have succumbed to COVID-19. We remain very focused on flattening the curve and saving lives in Washington, and we continue to remind everybody that our stay-at-home order is in place, that you should only be leaving your house for essential activities, that's work, going to get food or medicine, or essential exercise in your neighborhood. We also remind residents that face coverings do not replace social distancing. So please be mindful of only making essential trips. We are also urging residents who feel sick to reach out to their doctor or call our COVID-19 testing hotline. And keep in mind, we have expanded eligibility for testing. So beyond having the symptoms that we've been talking about for a number of weeks, fever, cough, shortness of breath. Please be mindful of any symptoms of not feeling well, not feeling yourself, and reach out to your healthcare provider and ask your provider what to do. You may also reach out to the citywide testing hotline at 1-855-363-0333. I also want to continue to call your attention to all the places around the city that are doing testing. You can reach out, as I said, to your own provider. If you're part of a medical plan, you can reach out to your medical plan. Children's National Health System is testing children and workers from all across the city. All Care Family Medicine is testing as well. Mary Center, Unity Healthcare, Whitman Walker Health, MedStar in a couple of locations, Sibley Memorial Hospital. And the new citywide site that we have opened is at the UDC Community College campus at Bertie Bacchus in Northeast, and that is located at the Fort Totten Metro Station. So once again, the eligibility criteria have been expanded. Anyone who has been exposed, anyone who is feeling sick, please reach out to one of the numbers at our testing sites. I also want to thank the members of the council who are helping us spread the word about testing, and we will continue to get that word out to as many residents as we possibly can. I now want to turn over the conversation to Chairman Mendelson. We are combining today's briefing with the council, and I want to thank my colleagues on the council for their hard work, for helping us spread the word, and for acting very swiftly on two pieces of legislation that is helping the district respond to this unprecedented emergency in our city. So with that, I want to turn to the chairman, who I know has been working with the city administrator on daily and getting questions to the council. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon to everyone. Behind me is a screen, which is why I keep turning around to see what council members are on. My understanding is that the council members, while they can see through the, I guess it's a WebEx, they're muted, and however, they will be communicating with me by text if they have questions, and we expect that that will happen after the Chief Financial Officer gives his report on the revenue estimates. I believe some council members have already submitted questions in writing. We asked them to do that in advance to the city administrator with regard to COVID-19 and the public health emergency and the city's response. And so I expect that, Rashad, you'll be going through those questions. I do not, to your blessing, I do not have any additional questions for you unless there's something where I think maybe you could clarify in the answer you give to members. So there's a little bit of awkwardness here in that I have to turn around to see folks, I have to look at the text to hear folks, and but members, I believe all the members are attending virtually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CA.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I have received 5 sets of questions from members from Councilmember Robert White and Councilmember Charles Allen. Sent those questions either late last night or early this morning. We have responded to those questions to all council members in writing as of about 1:20 p.m. So Councilmember White, your questions about the DC jail and DCPS learning have been sent back to you in writing. Councilmember Allen, your question about the online portal for self-employed and 1099 filers, which the mayor indicated is available and open today. That question and the link, and as well as the information that we're sending to those filers, were sent to you today. And then you asked us about ward level breakdown, and we have sent a response back to you on that question. The other questions that we received are from council members Nadeau, Che, and Silverman. Councilmember Nadeau, you asked us, and I think Silverman also asked about the contact tracers and our plan to staff up on those tracers. We are working through that process as we speak. We'll be working today and through the weekend for our human capital strategy there. They are likely to be both government employees as well as contract employees, and they will be in various tiers. And so we will have tiers for those who are doing direct outreach. We're looking for those who have a public health background, and then there will be a supervisory tier. So we will give you more information to that as we develop our plan to stand up that effort. Councilmember Nadeau, you also asked for a shelter by shelter breakdown of the number of individuals in shelter who have tested positive. We will have to pull that data and organize it as such, and so we can follow up with you with that data. Lastly, you asked how many slots do we have for our PEP-V rooms, and these are for individuals who are the most infirmed in our congregate care settings. There are about, as of today, 14 rooms available. Councilmember Che, you asked for data to be broken out in a pretty specific way. Wanted to know how many hospitalizations and deaths have there been in the district from various vulnerable populations, including nursing homes, long-term care facilities, senior homes, shelters, and other congregate settings. We will have to review our data and put that together for you in the manner that you are requesting. Lastly, you asked, you made note that on Monday we're opening a short-term family shelter in Ward 3, and you are asking if we ought to test all of those families that are coming in to that shelter as opposed to only screening those individuals for COVID-19. So we have not had any positive tests or any positive individuals at our family-style shelter system thus far. We think that our protocol for screening families as they come into those settings is most appropriate, and so we intend to continue to move in that posture. Mr. Chairman, those were all the questions that we received.
Thank you. There was a follow-up from Councilmember Allen. while DOES may not request ward-level data in the application, we would have their data through their residential address. Could that be run to help us see a picture ward by ward of the impact of the UI claims?
So we would have to cross-tab that data or cross-reference that data to get a ward breakout. Let me talk to DOES about that. It certainly is possible, but Councilmember Allen and other members, as you know, DOES is moving on many fronts to be able to manage the flow of claims that come in, institute new procedures to reduce the time that individuals wait. And so my preference is all of their focus be on processing claims and adjudicating claims and creating systems to move that faster. So let me evaluate the level of effort it would require for us to produce that information in that way, and we can follow up and give that feedback.
And CA, I might just add that we are looking for some outside help with data, the type of data searching and mining that is indicated in that question. But that's not our focus right now.
Sure. I have one other question, and that is on the coronavirus.dc.gov website, there's trend lines, number of tests, for example, but there isn't a trend line for the number of deaths. Not that that's a statistic we're happy about. Can that be depicted?
Can we go back? I think the number of deaths is so low on the, as Dr. Nesbitt likes to say, it's an XY axis problem. Actually,
Okay.
it's there. It's just very low.
It's the pinkish
It's very
line
close to. It's very close
to the orange.
axis.
Okay, that's helpful, because that of course is one of the important statistics in seeing
Right.
when we've reached a peak and are turning it around. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
with that, and I
Thank
know we'll have some opportunity for more questions, but I wanted to have the main focus of today's conversation to be about the district's revenue estimates, and the CFO is here, whose job it is to certify these revenues at different points throughout the year, and if there's a significant change, he has to issue an update. And this is important, especially now, because I am able to base my budget recommendation to the council once I know what the certified revenues are. So that's what we are here today to discuss, and we'll move. We will move to our budget preparation in its final stages based on this number. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Chairman Mendelson, and members of the council who are joining us remotely. What I want to do today is walk you through the update from the official February 2020 revenue estimates that we did. We called it a flash update in March based upon data that was available. And before I walk you through this, let me give you a little bit of an update. So what we've done since then is we've had numerous meetings with the hospitality industry, with the Restaurant Association, the Hotel Association, business community, looking at things as detailed as how credit card data looks in aggregate in the district from services that are provided, where people are spending their money, what's retail look like at the storefront versus online, how much is grocery store spending going on, what is the impact on the real estate market of a hotel being shut down, and had discussions on that. So we spent the last month looking at things in a great bit of detail. Since then, there's been a lot of changes in the last 30 days. One is the convention center will be a hospital, have hospital services provided there, in the opening date of that, based on conventions around the United States. There's an article in the Bond Buyer magazine this morning that talks about that, the hotel industry's probably got a 3-year recovery from what's going on across the United States. And the openings of that, where sporting events are, when they're going to open. So all those things we've looked at and have revised the estimates. So if you go to the next slide, or I guess I have the control here. So what you, should be another slide here. Where it's a second. Where's the slide of assumptions? Okay, I don't see it on here. Yeah, can you bring that up, or I'll just talk about it. So you'll see this presentation on our website at cfo.dc.gov, and what I want to talk about are some of the forecast assumptions that are there before I go forward. We're assuming that this is going to be a slow recovery beginning in the summer of 2020, and you'll hear on the news people talk about U-shaped recoveries and V-shaped recoveries. In other words, down quick and back up quick, or down and flat for a while, then back up. We're assuming from our forecast that this is going to be a U-shaped recovery. We believe that the stock market will recover, but not until 2021 in a material way. And we're also assuming that the federal aid does not offset the revenue losses that we have. The current federal aid is for COVID expenses. It does not offset revenues. There's some projections that we have in the wages. Previously, we project wages to grow at 4% a year. The revised is now minus 1% in 2020, and then it grows at 0.6% in 2021, so that's plus 4 to minus 1. That's a 5% lower forecast on wage growth in 2020. We expect in 2022 that wages will then begin growing at about 5.5%, so the recovery will be strong in 2020. In terms of jobs, the previous projections we had at 1.1% revised down. Now it's a minus 5.1%. There's been about 93,000 jobs lost, mostly in the hospitality industry, from January to what we're projecting to July of 2020. And we expect that recovery to begin in 2021 at about 0.5% and then strong from there. The real gross domestic product for Washington, D.C., which is the output of our economy, previously we'd assumed that would grow at about 2%. We've revised that to a minus 3.8%. So that's a 5.8% change in GDP, which is fairly unprecedented. That's larger than you would likely have seen in the Great Recession. And then 2021 will begin growing again at about 2.3%, reflecting the recovery. We're assuming the stock market will be down about 15% for the year, and then recover back to its prior peak in 2021 in terms of what the recovery will look like in terms of the economy. The next slide that I have here, can you change the slide up there? There you go. This is a graph. It's not the Covoid graph you saw earlier. This is a GDP graph, and the blue line is the line that we were forecasting back in February of 2020 in terms of gross domestic product growth in the district. This is what a U looks like. This shows you that we're experiencing a steep drop in economic output in the district due to the shutdown, and you see the recovery takes all the way to the fourth quarter of 2021, or in other words, end of the year 2021, before we get back to the GDP numbers we saw in January before this all started. So it's almost more than a full year, almost a year and a half before you get back to, actually the end of 2019 to 2021, it's a 2-year recovery back to, beginning of 2020 to the end of 2021. That shows you what a U-shaped recovery looks like, and you'll notice that's what a recession looks like. You don't get back to where you were going to be, you drop, and then you're always trying to catch up because the growth has to catch back up. There's some assumptions in our forecast that we have to make. We're assuming that a phase of recovery has been talked about in Washington, D.C. and across the country. We assume some businesses will be allowed to open with social distancing and other restrictions this summer. And the recovery really begins in the fall when things start opening up and business start being able to ramp back up. You can't just turn a business switch back on. They have to hire, they have to do other things. And so we're assuming that recovery begins in the fall of 2020. And we get to what I'm calling a new normal, whatever that looks like, by the spring and summer of 2021, where we're in recovery mode and we're starting again going forward. Those are the key assumptions in the forecast. When you look at what's really causing the hits in the revenue, I'm going to show you in just a second, it's largely driven this year by the sales tax. Sales tax comprise about 18% of our revenues. If you look at the pie on the left, you can see sales taxes at about 18%, about $1.6 billion. The pie on the right shows you the breakdown of the sales taxes. You'll notice that 56% of it is hotel, restaurant, and parking, which are essentially, for the most part, shut down, with probably about 60% of the restaurants open, running at 20% or less of their regular revenue. Hotels, half of them are open, but they're running 5 to 10% occupancy rates. And then retail, particularly storefront retail, is taking a hit. And online purchases like Amazon and Wayfair and people shopping at Costco's and Walmart's, although those are up, they're not up enough to offset the loss of the other retail. So you've kind of wiped out the hotel and restaurants, and the retail's also taking a hit, which is really driving the loss of revenue in the current year and in the forecast. And I'll show you that in just a minute. This is the actual revenue forecast in which the budget is required to be based on. We budget not only 2021, we budget to a financial plan. And you'll see the February revenue estimate on the top line, and then you'll see the April revisions. We are lowering the February forecast for 2020 by $721.8 million, the 21 forecast by $773.6 million, 22 by $605.6 million, 23 by $568.1 million, and 24 by $555.1 million. That's what a recession looks like. It takes out your base, and it takes out the forecast growth that you had previously forecasted. That's about a 7% drop in the 2020 revenue, and on average across the entire 5-year plan, it's about 7% that you have to reduce your spending by to get back to a balanced budget and financial plan. To put it in perspective, if you look at the 2019 number in the first column under February, you'll see 8314, $8.3 billion local revenues in February 2019. You do not get back to that number. If you look down a little bit to the April 2020 line, you'll see in 2022 we get back to 8370. So functionally, the 2022 revenue is equal to the 2019 revenue. So you're losing 2 years of revenue growth because of the health emergency that we're facing and its impacts on the economy. So really, you have to cut 20 and 21 because they're lower, and you get back to 2019 levels. So you really have no growth for 2 years. And again, this is relative to the February forecast, and you can see at the bottom the year-over-year change. You begin to grow again in 21 and 22. There's a strong rebound, but you're wiping out the revenue growth before that. So these are the numbers that the city administrator and I talked about last night that we'll be working with him and the mayor's office to help them prepare their budget to balance to these revenues, and then this will be going on to the council to work with them. The other area that you have hit is dedicated taxes are also hit by particularly the sales tax. As I mentioned a minute ago, most of this is sales tax, about $395 million reduction in sales taxes. About $262 million of that is in the local budget, and about $134 million of it is dedicated to other sources. So if you look at the table below, you'll see that the local in 2020 is $262 million, and it's $296 million in 2021. That's the hit from sales taxes alone. The other hits you have in the revenue estimates are you have sales tax this year and some income because of the unemployment and the lost wages, and you have some slowdown that we're projecting in the real estate market, particularly deed and recordation taxes, as that slows down a bit. But the hit you have in 2021 and 2022, in 2022 in particular, you have the real estate impact of the delay between when we assess and when taxes are paid. So 20 is mainly sales taxes, 21 is sales taxes and income taxes, because the stock market drops today affect income taxes paid next year. And 2022, you have the hit in property taxes, a little bit on income taxes, and sales taxes recovering. So that's why you see this continue through the forecast. The point of this table is to show you that the dedicated taxes are also taking a downturn, and the biggest one is the convention center, which is obviously those dedicated taxes are restaurant and hotels. And so $86.2 million less to the convention center and $70.8 less to the convention center in 20 and 21. So they're going to have to majorly redo their budget as well to reflect these lower estimates. And some other categories that are in the other taxes are things like baseball taxes we collect from baseball games and admission tickets and things around the ballpark. That's around $8 million. And WMATA dedicated taxes, which we will have to make up from other sources because they are also dropping, and other areas like that. So that's just to give you a feel that it's just not the general fund that gets hit. It's those areas that are funded by dedicated taxes that are also being impacted by this. The one thing about any forecast anyone's doing anywhere in the country is there's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of uncertainty about what will happen, what's going to happen with the
persevere. So thank you all again.
If there's a second wave, what does that do to the economy? So what we had a lot of discussions about, we've done several scenarios as well as looking at, could this get better, could this get worse, and what does that look like? Well, how could it get better? Will the public health interventions continue to work? Therapy protocols are earlier than expected. A vaccine is discovered that allows us to get back to normal quicker. Increased federal assistance that helps offset revenue losses that every city in the country is looking for and asking for assistance on. Broader acceptance of use of how we do things. Maybe we can get more efficient in restaurant carry out and they can generate more revenue, or other traditional things that are done in person are found to be done remotely and efficiencies are gained there. And how could it get worse? A second wave of an infection in the fall and a second close down, that would probably be in any city or for the country in general. If you have a opening and a second shutdown, that has a huge impact on the revenue forecast because you're starting all over again. And we ran a scenario of a second shutdown in the late fall, and that was another $250 million off of the forecast per year you've already seen. So you'd be into the $1 billion a number drop if we ended up having a significant second wave that we weren't able to open up again for a little while. A delay in opening, if this goes deep into, let's say in August, we're going to be reforecasting this per the agreement with the mayor and the council to let them know if this needs to change. If we're still in a complete shutdown, we'll know by then, the forecast obviously would be more significant. And then other things that no one knows at the moment, like no one predicted negative oil prices last week and things like that, but greater negative stock market reaction, if it's worse than we forecasted, for every 10%, it's another $50 million per year off the forecast. Every 10% the market goes down, that impacts us in capital gains in the future years. So if that's worse than we projected, it would be worse. Institutional stresses in the financial area, banks start getting stressed with liquidity, or increased levels of bankruptcies beyond what we're forecasting. I am in constant, almost daily contact with several other cities. CFOs from all the other cities are dealing with these same issues. How do you forecast this? How do you look at it? What's the impacts? There's cities that I talked to last night that their impacts are twice as large as this. There's cities in some areas, Santa Monica, California, there was an article in the governing online magazine the other day. They're looking at 38% reductions in their budget. So it is every city in the country is facing it. Every state is facing it. We have bi-weekly calls with all the state treasurers of what they're going through and how they're trying to deal with it. So we are no different than anyone else. We did in 2019 in a better place than most cities with our surpluses. But as you saw in the forecast, 2020 and 2021 are almost $1.5 billion, which is larger than our reserves, just those 2 years. So that's not that will not get you through the downturn. This is a recession, no matter how you look at it, and it is what we're trying to forecast is something that is justified and based on the data we have and the information we have, and we'll be working with the mayor and the council to come up with a budget that balances to this. Again, as I put this as simple as possible, basically by 2022 we're back to 2019 levels, and that's one way to kind of look at the impact of this forecast. So we will be posting our presentation on the website. You'll be able to go to cfo.dc.gov and see that, and our official letter will be released later this afternoon before 5 p.m. That is the official letter from me certifying the budget. That will be released here shortly, and you can go see all the details and dig into this in any way you want. And any council members that have any questions beyond this evening or beyond this conference, feel free to call me, and I'll walk you through the letter or any questions you may have on this forecast. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, CFO. And before I turn to the chairman again, we appreciate the news that you shared. We recognize how serious it is and how serious the decisions will be moving forward. We also recognize the position that we came into this pandemic with. And I think that's important to be able to discuss the strong fundamentals of the city and the strong management and governing practices of the city moving into this pandemic. And feel free to discuss that.
Yeah, so Mayor, that's a great point. We ended the year with our reserves full. and we ended the year with actually 360 some million beyond the full reserves that we were able to place into the Housing Production Trust Fund and the PAYGO Capital Fund. And we had a economy that was really, really, really strong in February. That, you know, no economy doesn't take a hit if you have to shut things down. But the recovery will probably be better than most places because of a couple areas we have. Federal government is here, and they're a significant part of our tax base. And don't underestimate the resiliency of the restaurant industry and other entrepreneurs in the district to come back. But it's a hit. And we literally, I was talking to the chairman last night, and one of his staff made the comment, thank goodness for 2019. That, because of how we ended 2019, put us in a position to deal with this better than most cities. It's why our cuts are probably less than a lot of other cities are going to be seeing.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I want to turn to the chairman, and I know that we'll have some time for council questions, and then I want to reserve the balance of the time for the press questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Chief Financial Officer. There are a number of questions that have come in from council members. I'm going to make a couple remarks first. I want to say to council members that we're going to try to limit questions to, if we can, about 15 minutes, so that then there is time for the press to ask questions as well. These numbers are sobering. They speak to the gravity of the economic situation. I appreciate, Madam Mayor, that your administration has already begun working with the council with regard to the supplemental, and the supplemental is what we call the revised budget for the current fiscal year, which, based on these estimates, we have to find savings of $721 million, $722 million. That is spending less than we thought we would be able to spend in the current fiscal year. The fact that we ended last year with surplus makes it easier for us to solve for the current fiscal year. And for anybody who's thinking about it or looking at it, you know, solving $720 million over 5 months is harder than solving it over 12 months. So next year at $773 million is a challenge, but we have a year to spread those savings. But I want to emphasize that already we have been working together, because what I want to see is that when the supplemental budget comes to us, we're able to move it quickly. And as painful as it is to look at reducing the budget, that we'll be able to do it with a relative unanimity. It's important that we're working together at this time. And I think that's also a good message for the citizens as well. The mayor is you are submitting the budget to us on May 12th, and the budget will be available online and maybe with books on May 12th. So everybody gets to see it. We have changed our schedule. We are finalizing what the hearing schedule will be, which will be streamlined because it will be virtual. That's our assumption, that we will continue to be virtual throughout the month of May. So that means our hearings will have to be more carefully managed. But we expect that we will take the, I'm going to say 56 days between getting the submission of the budget and our first vote. So hearings, I'm saying this for the public's benefit, hearings the month of May and the first week of June, and then our internal processes, which are generally a public process, but still internal, and then we will be voting at the end of June, first vote and the second vote 2 weeks later. But the supplemental, as I said, will be moving more quickly. And
Thank you.
That's why we are working together on that. And I also, even though this is a little perverse, I take some comfort in the fact that our situation, financial situation, is strong enough that when we look at other cities and states, their pain is worse. And I'm not sure that's a good thing to wish on anybody, but at least it suggests that we'll get through this. So I have a question from Councilmember Allen. Is the fourth quarter 2021 recovery projected on our economic stimulus as it has already taken place? That would be economic stimulus, both local efforts and the Federal CARES Act. as it has already taken place, or is the fourth quarter 2021 recovery projected based on any particular steps, stimulus, intervention, and recovery that the CFO is recommending? If it's as of today, isn't it correct that there are steps we can and should take to lessen the depth and breadth of the economic damage that will impact our recovery?
I would say it's based upon a couple things. One, it's how long it takes a restaurant to recover from where it is today. It's assuming that there's some successful implementation of the PPP program and they get that working better. It is not working extremely well, particularly for the restaurant industry right now, and there needs to be some fixes to that. So it's assuming the PPP program will continue to work, but it really reflects that you open in the summer and how long it takes a restaurant and a hotel industry to get ramped up and how long it takes conventions to come back. So it's based on current and some improvements in the federal assistance programs. If those don't work, it could get a little bit worse. Or take a little longer to recover.
What we think may happen is not reflected in the estimate. When I say what we think may happen in terms of federal relief.
It's assuming that the PPP program helps keep our businesses propped up and starts working better than it is today with the new rollout of the additional money and other things. So it assumes that the federal programs help work on that.
Yes, no, that wasn't, I don't think that's what the question means. CARES 4, I think that's the, or
Coming.
COVID 4, the next federal bill, that's not reflected in
No,
it.
that is not. That's correct. That is, the next bill is not reflected. That's correct.
And some other ideas that have been suggested are not reflected in these
That is
estimates.
correct. Anything that's not currently legislated, we're not assuming in there.
But we're also expecting a revenue estimate sooner than we otherwise would in August.
Right, yes.
In August, yes,
Yes.
so that if we have to make adjustments. Councilmember Nadeau asked, George Mason University's economist has said we should not expect a U-shaped recovery curve because this is not a business sector-driven recession. Can you please speak to how your models take that into consideration?
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning from what different CEOs think about the recovery. And one of them said, if you got the smartest economists in the room,
They all
12
have
of them
a
together,
different-
they'll all
yeah.
have a different opinion.
Yeah.
Ours is consistent with Blue Chip and Moody's Analytics and several others. So there are, it could be, if it's a W, if it's a slower recovery, then that revenue numbers are going to be bigger. We believe that a U-shaped recovery is possible as long as we're able to get open, by the summer, and we're able to manage it in a way that doesn't cause a second shutdown. That a U-shaped recovery is possible in our current economy. But there used to be V's that it comes back quickly, like the shutdown. Those economists have all become extinct. There's U's and W's now. It's U, it's going to go down, it's going to stay flat, it's going to go up, or there's it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up. That's the two camps right now. And we've done the W modeling, that adds another $200 to $300 million onto the drop. So hopefully that one doesn't happen.
But
But we don't see that it would. We believe it use where it's going. If you look at it, it looks like a ladle.
Long as it's not an L.
Yeah, as long as it's not
Somebody
an L.
told me
Yeah,
it was
we don't
going
want
to
an
be
L.
L.
We don't want to go down and
We
stay
don't want to go down and stay
If you look
down.
back at the
They all have us
slide,
coming back up.
if you go back to the slide, I don't know if I can do that. That looks like that's the U. It kind of looks like a ladle. It goes down, and then it goes up, and then it kind of goes up slowly after that. So that is the forecast that we're providing.
that's your estimates are not an outlier when you look at what
No,
other
they're
economists-
consistent with 3 or 4 other major economic firms. We're right in the same range as they are.
Councilmember Silverman had a couple of questions. Does CFO assumptions show that some restaurants and hotels will not reopen? If so, what %? And will the CFO still do an end of June forecast?
We will, to answer the last question first, we will do an August forecast. We won't do a June. You'll be using this one for the budget, and when you finish the budget, we'll reforecast in August, which will give the mayor the opportunity to make changes to go back to you. So there will be no June forecast And what was the other?
Does the CFO assumption show that some restaurants and hotels will not reopen? If so, what percent?
You know, we're estimating, and this is from discussions with the Restaurant Association, of the 40% that are shut down, probably 20% of those will struggle to reopen. And on the hotel side, we expect in the long run they'll reopen, but it may take 3 to 5 years before they all get back to where they are. And that's consistent with a Moody's report this morning that showed up in the Bond Buyer magazine about hotel recoveries. And that's from discussions with those industries.
This also from Councilmember Silverman. What businesses will not open late summer?
We don't know
We
that.
we don't assume that. We don't go into that detail.
Councilmember Grasso asked, what is the impact if we get the $700 million from Congress? So let me broaden that. So we got the 495 or 500 million. What's happened with that? And if we get the amount that we were shortchanged, what's the impact of that on these revenue estimates?
Do you want me to?
As to the 490 million, Mr. Chairman and Councilmember Grasso, we are working to apply our federal expenses for COVID-19 response into various buckets, including the CARES Act resource that provided 490 million. Yesterday, the Department of Treasury gave additional guidance to states about the use of those funds. They are a bit broader than what we originally thought they would be. It is clear, though, we can't use those resources for revenue replacement, but we can use them for secondary impacts that are related to the pandemic response. And so if we have additional and extraordinary costs as a result of the pandemic to provide services, those could be eligible to be covered by that resource. So our budget team are working with our agencies about how best to leverage those resources along with the FEMA reimbursement and the number of other federal grants that have come to the district.
The 495, we received that. It's deposited, and we have the cash from the Treasury. We received it, I think, half of it Thursday and the other half Monday. So we actually have the money for that. And as Rashad said, we got guidance from Treasury yesterday that clarified how to use it. Going to your $700-some million number, that's in the, if we're treated fairly as a state, that's the additional money we would get. And every treasurer of every state in the United States and every large city CFO that we have talked to is begging for Congress to allow their resources to be used for revenue replacement as well as, and make some changes to that law. So if we got that to cover our COVID expenses and help with the revenues, it certainly would help balance this budget. Every state in the country is asking for that to Congress.
The other piece I'll add is an important part of how we think about using that resource. That $495 million must be expended by the end of the calendar year. So we've got to be thoughtful about what we apply it to and how we use it so that we can make sure to get every dollar out the door within the time frame that the Congress has allowed.
But what is either amounts, the 495 or the 700 million, due to these revenue estimates?
They
No,
don't.
they're not. No, they're not in the revenue estimates.
They don't, because they can be used for revenue, so they're not reflected in the estimate.
They would cover your expenses. If your
Expenditures.
expenses are higher than 495, you would have an additional budget hit that we'd have to deal with.
Right.
And I think I'm not sure if the latest guidance addresses this, but they were for only COVID-related activities, only for things that had not been approved in previous budgets and must be expended by the end of the year.
Yes.
It is helpful because some of the things that we've talked about that are related but secondary to our immediate response, we're thinking about how to expense those now.
And I think the law says from March, the date of the bill's approved,
yeah.
till December 30th, the expenses have to occur during that period. So if you had expenses before that, they're not eligible to be reimbursed through that.
Councilmember Todd asked, what does all this do to our bond rating and our borrowing?
Our bond rating is still AAA by Moody's, and we expect to do everything to keep it there. So every city in the country is seeing these hits. What the rating agencies will look at is how do you manage it? How do you plan to drain your reserves to zero? That's absolutely 100% a downgrade. Do you plan to budget it, balance it in a way that is doesn't have a lot of gimmicks in it, that actually balances the budget? That's what the rating agencies are looking at. We, because of the convention center hit, because of all the credits they've been re-rating, we probably talk to the rating agencies twice a week right now. And so they know all the things that we're considering in terms of short-term borrowing that the council did last week. So our rating is still solid. It's how we deal with this, these revenue drops is what they'll be looking at.
Does it matter, our rating in terms of, this is actually a leading question to get at what you said to me earlier, when we come out of the recession?
I think probably more than ever because, as I said, there's some cities and states that are taking extraordinary hits beyond what we're looking at. And if the federal government chooses not to help, they are going to have a really, really hard time getting through this unprecedented, very rapid drop in the economy. And I could see there being some challenges with them meeting their obligations. And so if any of those start failing to meet their obligations,